Here's your Storm Track 7 forecast.
I'm Storm Track 7 meteorologist Danny Casty. After a partly to mostly cloudy day today, we're starting to get a little bit more of an active next 24 hours, starting with tonight. Now, not necessarily super active tonight, but there is some severe weather off to our west. Here you see all of this yellow level 2 risk. But locally for us here in northern portions of the viewing area north of Highway 20, we do have a level 1 out of 5 risk. So maybe some strong storms. The only potential really would be some small hail. This would be after midnight tonight. Yeah, not expecting too much out of this, but with a little bit of some elevated moisture, we could see maybe some stronger storms. So here's future track. We'll pick it up for this evening, and clouds will start to build in a little bit. And then here's midnight, and you see some scattered showers and storms possible. That'll move off to the northeast. And again, you're going to notice little pockets of red and orange there. So again, potential of maybe some stronger storms is there. That continues through the morning hours here. We could see more scattered showers and storms through the late morning into the early afternoon hours. And then we'll see a pause, I think, around noon. And then we're going to have to wait and see how much clearing we get, how much sunshine we get, if there's enough energy to see storms for Monday afternoon, evening, and those could be strong to severe, and that's where the bigger threat lies. So for tonight, low temperatures are going to be in the mid-50s with that scattered showers and storm chance. Winds will be strong out of the south, 10 to 20, gusts to 30, and they're only going to pick up during the day tomorrow. You notice that sustained wind rises to about 15 to 25, gusts up to 40, and it's out of the south, so that's going to bring in more moisture. It's going to bring in more warmth and therefore bring in a chance of potentially strong and severe storms. We have a Storm Track 7 red alert day due to the fact that we could see significant severe weather with all modes of severe weather possible, meaning large hail, damaging wind gusts, and a few tornadoes. The time frame for this would be, I moved it up an hour just in case that cap breaks earlier, from about 3 p.m. to midnight Monday night. So the overall setup, basically the entire country, or I shouldn't say the entire country, but from north to south, it almost goes from border to border in terms of this severe weather. But you see the bullseye here centered over the Twin Cities, western portions of Wisconsin, and north of Highway 20 there for here in eastern Iowa. So you see that level 4 out of 5 risk. It did get trimmed back from yesterday. Yesterday, it went down to near the Iowa City area. Now it's just north of Highway 20 because there's more uncertainty for the farther south areas if we can break that warmer air aloft. So the main threats you can see with this are going to be large hail and tornadoes, primarily because what we're going to be watching for is this is going to be the warm sector right here, this level 4 risk. And where that means, or what that means basically is if storms fire off ahead of the cold front out to the west, they're going to be more discrete, basically individual cells. And usually those cells are characteristics of hail and tornadoes. So that's why that threat is larger. Winds will be, if during the nighttime hours we see a line of storms move through, then that threat would be elevated, but as well as tornadoes because we could still see some spin-ups. Now this, of course, is if we can get any of these storms to fire off. So we'll show you the threats here again a little bit more detailed. So where that level 4 is, north of Highway 20, you see that purple. It's kind of on the 4 out of 5 on the likelihood if we see severe weather. So you see that black hash mark there too. That means significant severe weather. That would refer to tornadoes of EF2 or higher. Then for hail, baseball size potential. Again, if we see any isolated cells, this is for really the entire state of Iowa and all of eastern Iowa. If we see any of those individual cells, we could see hail up to baseball size. Now the winds, again, a little bit on the lower end because, again, by the time that organized line comes through, I think it'll be later in the nighttime and we'll see a little bit of that steam wear off. But with those winds, we could see them anywhere from about 60 to 70 miles per hour. But as I mentioned, there are still some questions and some big questions that could really turn this into a low floor, high ceiling. Now, I just watched the NFL draft, so that terminology is just coming out of my brain. But basically what this means is we could see very little in terms of activities, but if we do see storms, they could be that strong, severe, and that's why this risk is considered conditional because a lot has to do with this cap. And I referred to it yesterday, but I'll say it again. Basically, it's warmer air aloft. In order to get clouds, in order to get rain, in order to get storms, you need air to rise from the surface, mix with the upper levels of the atmosphere, and then once it condenses, it forms clouds, rain, storms, etc. However, sometimes you get warmer air aloft that when the air tries to rise, it stops because air only rises if it's warmer than its surroundings. But if there's a little bit of warmer air above the surface and it can't rise, those clouds can't form, those storms can't form, and then therefore their strong severe storm chances is lower. And so we're going to have to watch if we can see that break. How does it break? Usually we have warm-ups during the day. You see sunshine, you see strong southerly flow helping it warm up a little bit, that we can help break that cap. The problem is that we have some cloud cover during the morning hours as well as some morning activity that could really kind of make the cap stay in place. Unfortunately, if the cap does break, as I mentioned yesterday as well, sometimes it can go against us because if things are kind of brewing at the surface and the cap kind of just squeezes things on, it's like if you had a hose and you put your hand up to the hose, it's kind of building up the water pressure, and eventually it breaks, then things explode and they can be very strong, severe, and that's why the level 4 risk is in place. So with that being said, that also lines up with the timing of the storms. If the cap breaks, what time does it break? Does it break early in the afternoon or later in the evening? If it breaks early in the afternoon, 3, 4 o'clock, it could start, and that's where we see the more discrete cells. That's when we line up into the most likely hazard. If we see that cap break early, then the most likely hazard would be tornadoes and large hail. If the cap stays pretty stout and then storms arrive later with that decaying line of storms out west, then maybe more likely it'd be winds and maybe a few embedded tornadoes. So there's a lot of questions with this, but let's go over both scenarios here. First, we're going to talk about if the cap breaks. So here's noon at Future Track, and you're going to notice that as we move through, here's 3 o'clock, and you're noticing these little cells. Now, with this Future Track, this is, again, getting a little into the weeds here, but this is the European model, and it's a little bit less high resolution. So you're not going to get these dark reds and pinks, but it's more of where things are located. You see these little cells. This is where we're starting to worry that maybe potentially some of these isolated cells could contain that large hail as well as tornadoes. So that's what we're going to watch for. So those cells develop, and then we'll have a line even behind it. So if the cap breaks, we could see 2 rounds because, of course, the isolated storms aren't going to take up all of the energy. That line then moves in behind, and then that's where we see the potential of all 3 hazards as well. So this continues to move through the afternoon, evening hours. You can see that rain picking up as well. So your 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, you see it become pretty organized. Now it evolves more into that wind threat. Now here comes into 8 o'clock, continues to move through the region. 9 o'clock here starting on our southern and eastern edge. 10 o'clock now getting into areas kind of along I-80 and for our eastern counties. 11 o'clock starts to move out of the area, and then midnight, the brunt of it is over. Still could see some leftover showers and storms, but that moves off to the southeast and the severe threat is done. So that is the worst case scenario. We see that cap break and we see those storms. Now let's talk about scenario 2, where the cap really stays in place for really the majority of the day. So here's noon on Future Track. There's those morning activities, and you see the cloud cover kind of hangs around a little bit, and maybe our temperatures don't warm up as much as we'd like to for the cap to break. I guess we wouldn't necessarily like it. We want it to stay a little bit cooler because then that could help the cap stay in place. We still could see some isolated storms, and again, we'll have to watch for this development, but if that cap stays stout, then maybe there's just more general showers and storms. So you see that move through here, 6 o'clock. Again, we'll have to watch for cells like that. But then now look through the evening hours, all that activity, it's just really capped. It's all off to the north and to the west where that level 4 is, extending into Minnesota. And we maybe see some isolated severe storms, but that's it. So the cap not only could limit our severe potential just for the entire area, but limits it more to isolated storms, or if there's a storm kind of activity off to the west, then that would help it lose strength as it moves into parts of eastern Iowa. So those are the 2 scenarios. Obviously, we really want scenario 2, but I want to prepare you for both scenarios in case it does happen. So for tomorrow, high temperatures in the upper 70s, low 80s, and we'll watch for these temperatures. If the clouds hang around, we could see a little bit cooler, and obviously that is what we're going to want. Your city-by-city forecast for Waterloo, Dubuque, Cedar Rapids, and Iowa City. So Tuesday, no matter what, is dry and windy. Wednesday, we'll see some scattered showers, maybe an isolated storm. This is not expected to be severe. Same with on Thursday, that rain chance, and then we dry out for the weekend, not looking too shabby, into the 70s. And then for the following week, maybe a couple of storm chances there. Of course, too late or too into the week to know the exact details, but again, a couple of storms possible for the following week.